They say when a man gets fired, he either burns the place down or walks away so quietly the flames come later. I chose the second kind.
My name is David Ellis. I'm 47 years old, and until about 45 minutes ago, I was the director of brand strategy at Halverson & Flint, a marketing agency that once upon a time believed in grit over gimmicks. I gave them 22 years. I helped build it from a boutique outfit of 12 people and an espresso machine that barely worked into a powerhouse with global accounts, a Manhattan skyline view, and a reputation for campaigns that stuck in people's heads. And now I'm the guy who blocked progress. That's what Scott said. Scott Hammond, our illustrious CEO in tailored navy suits and a voice like a podcast ad. I knew something was off the moment he called that brief end-of-quarter realignment meeting. I'd sat at that conference table through acquisitions, mergers, layoffs, and even one hostile takeover attempt. But today, it was just Scott, 2 HR reps, and a face I didn't recognize. Young, sharp jawline, too much product in his hair. Tristan. Scott leaned back in his chair like he was about to tell me I'd won a cruise. David, we deeply value your contributions, he began, with a kind of pause that told me this wasn't about value at all. But after reviewing our strategic trajectory, the board and I feel we need to embrace a more dynamic, future-forward branding voice. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just waited. You've been an incredible asset for over 2 decades, he continued. But frankly, we feel your approach may be... And here it came, the knife, blocking the company's progress. He gestured to Tristan like he was presenting a magic trick. We've brought on a new VP of strategy, Tristan K. You may know him from his recent TEDx talk, #human, branding in the age of digital empathy. Tristan stood, beaming like a kid who just got his first company car. Huge admirer of your legacy work, David, he said, offering his hand. Excited to learn from the trail you blazed. His handshake was limp and his eyes already looking past me. I didn't take the bait. No sarcasm, no plea for reconsideration, just silence. Because what could I say that I hadn't already proven? I thought about the Fortune 500 brand I'd helped rescue from a PR nightmare in 2009, the local coffee chain I'd scaled into a national player, the nights I stayed until 2 a.m. rebuilding decks after clients changed their minds at the 11th hour, the interns I mentored who went on to become senior creatives, partners, even friends, the loyalty bonuses I turned down, the job offers from bigger firms I passed up because I believed in this place. I looked around that glass-walled boardroom and realized it had already moved on without me. I didn't ask for a severance breakdown. I didn't make a speech. I just nodded once, stood, and said, "Understood." On my way back to my office, no one met my eyes. The silence was deafening, the kind reserved for funerals or the moments right before a scandal breaks. Sarah from content started to say something, but backed off when she saw Tristan trailing behind me. In my office, my nameplate was still crooked on the door. Had been for 6 years. I never fixed it. Superstition, maybe. I packed slowly. Laptop, legal pad, my Mont Blanc pen. I left behind the company swag, the awards, even the framed copy of our first agency-wide campaign win. But I took one thing, the original pitch book I wrote by hand for Ember, a lifestyle brand we turned from a backyard candle startup into a household name. That pitch book was my DNA. Tristan poked his head in just as I zipped my messenger bag. He handed me a thank you card, all bright orange with "You crushed it" in Comic Sans. I stared at it. He smiled. The team signed it. "You'll be missed, man. Big shoes. I didn't respond, just nodded once more and walked past him. The elevator ride down from the 32nd floor had never felt longer. When the doors opened, the receptionist glanced up, smiled nervously, and looked away. I stepped into the street, the cold spring air hitting me like a wake-up call. For a moment, I just stood there. Then I looked up at the building, Halverson and Flint, etched in steel and glass, and said under my breath, 3 weeks. That's all I need. Not to burn it down. Number. But to remind them who built the damn foundation in the first place. 3 weeks later, I sat alone in a co-working loft that smelled like burnt espresso and ambition. My desk was a beat-up slab of reclaimed wood wedged between a guy running an indie gaming startup and a woman who conducted Zoom therapy sessions with the volume always a little too loud. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. The walls were blank. My whiteboard wasn't. Marker lines carved across it like a battlefield map. Brand tiers, client names, value ladders, pain points, strategic footholds. I hadn't slept a full night since the day I walked out of Halverson and Flint, but I hadn't wasted a minute either. My plan had lived in the back of my mind for years, half fantasy, half fallback. Now it had a name, a logo, a domain, and as of yesterday, an LLC number. I was building a lean consultancy that targeted the very thing Tristan and Scott had abandoned. Mid-market clients, the steady ones, the ones who didn't need hashtags and AI mascots, the ones who just wanted to be understood and guided, not dazzled and talked down to. I was halfway through outlining a proposal deck when my phone buzzed. Lena Bell. I knew that name by heart. We'd worked together years ago when she was CMO at Hemley's, a family-run stationery brand we'd helped transition into the digital space. We'd launched their first e-commerce platform, redesigned their packaging, and turned their fourth quarter profits around with one elegantly simple holiday campaign. She was smart, calm under pressure, and allergic to fluff. My kind of person. I picked up. Lena. Well, the ghost returns, she said, her voice half smile, half knowing jab. I heard about Halverson. That was a hell of a quiet exit. I figured if I was going to leave a crater, I'd rather it be from outside the blast zone. She chuckled. You're freelancing? No, I said, standing to pace. I'm building something. Tight model. Strategic branding with a focus on market fundamentals. No jargon, no influencer decks, no 17-page mood boards to explain why the font needs to be approachably chaotic. God, thank you, she said. I'm in. Hemley's new board wants to rebrand for Gen Z without losing our legacy customers. I can't trust the agencies pitching us. Feels like they're trying to sell us sneakers, not paper. When do you need the proposal? Send me a draft by Friday. We'll go from there. We hung up. I sat down and stared at the wall for a second. Just stared. That call? That was the ignition. Lena wasn't just a client. She was validation. A reminder that what I'd built over decades still mattered. That there were people, real decision makers, who saw through Tristan's style over substance playbook. I remembered the way Tristan had handled Halverson's last big retail client before I left. They'd been with us for 6 years. Steady, responsive, profitable. Tristan came in with a pitch dripping in buzzwords, augmented product experiences, narrative-driven QR funnels, digital native micro-influencer activations. I watched the CEO's face fall halfway through the meeting. He didn't want a revolution. He wanted someone to help him tell his story without turning it into a meme. They left within the month. I, on the other hand, used to sit down with founders in their offices, at their kitchen tables, sometimes even on warehouse floors. I listened before I spoke. I told them what they needed to hear, not what sounded good in a pitch room. They remembered that. People like Lena remembered that. I pulled out the fresh contract template I'd written the night before, customized it, set my rate, typed out a simple, clean scope of work. 3 branding tiers, 1 clear path forward. When I clicked send, it wasn't relief I felt. It was precision, purpose. Like a carpenter laying the first plank of something he already sees finished in his mind. I leaned back, exhaled, and opened LinkedIn out of habit. There it was. Tristan, front and center, his face beaming in a new post. Honored to help H&F pivot away from outdated legacy thinking and embrace a fearless, disruptive future. Branding is no longer about loyalty, it's about velocity. I stared at the screen. Velocity? I clicked, read more. The post was a collage of buzzwords: frictionless synergy, vertical narratives, empathy analytics, and tucked between the fluff were 3 very obvious lies. 1, he claimed full credit for a campaign I'd led from scratch. 2, he implied we'd lost a client due to misalignment with digital-first values, when I knew damn well they walked after his botched pitch. And 3, he said Halverson had completely evolved beyond outdated account management models. I smirked. 3 lies, 3 cracks. Cracks meant pressure. And pressure, when applied just right, breaks the surface. I stood up, capped my whiteboard marker, and looked out the loft's dusty window toward the city. The same skyline I'd spent my whole career chasing approval from. Not anymore. Now, I was chasing something else entirely. By the end of week 5, I had 3 clients on retainer, each one a former partner of Halverson and Flint. I didn't steal them. I didn't even pitch. I just showed up. Quiet conversations over coffee, after-hours calls that started with, "I heard what happened," and ended with, "When can we start?" I didn't promise reinvention. I offered clarity. That was enough. Lena was first. Then came Marcus, an old-school logistics CEO who hated social media and trusted instinct over trend reports. Then Kira, who ran brand strategy at a national health chain and still remembered how I once stayed up all night helping her navigate a crisis over a misprinted slogan. None of them cared about hashtags or disruption or velocity. They cared about trust, about results. They remembered how I worked. More importantly, they remembered how Halverson had changed the moment I left. And word spread fast. David's back, leaner, sharper. That phrase came to me secondhand through a junior strategist I used to mentor. She whispered it at an event where Tristan was keynote. He was promoting something called the Empathy Stack, which sounded like a productivity app, but was apparently a branding framework. He looked confident, polished, but he wasn't fooling anyone who'd ever been in a real marketing war. A week later, I got a message. Subject line: collaboration opportunity. Sender: Tristan K. It almost made me laugh out loud. I clicked it open. "Hey David, I've been meaning to reach out. We're putting together a collaborative industry white paper to ease some recent client turbulence and thought your veteran insights would be a great counterbalance to our evolving vision. Let me know if you're open to chatting. Would be great to reconnect. No pressure, just synergy." Synergy. Of course. I stared at the email, considering. Then I responded. "Sounds interesting. Happy to contribute a perspective piece. Let me know what direction you're thinking." He replied within minutes, grateful, over-friendly, and, if I read between the lines, desperate. He didn't know I was behind the exodus. I was just the ghost he wanted to borrow credibility from. I played along. I offered a few vague, agreeable phrases in our follow-up call. Listened more than I spoke. I asked, gently, "You mentioned turbulence. Anything I should be aware of before I attach my name?" He hesitated. Then, in that smug tone he used to think sounded confidential, admitted that the Brainerd account had hit a rough patch after a bold rebranding pivot. I already knew. I'd heard about it from two separate sources. Brainerd had dumped Halverson after a product relaunch tanked. Packaging, messaging, all misaligned. Consumer feedback had been brutal. What Tristan didn't say, and what I knew, was that 6 months before I was forced out, I'd flagged that exact campaign plan in a brand risk audit. The data screamed caution, but it was buried once Tristan took over. I thanked him for the chat and said I'd circle back. Instead, I opened a blank document, created a new email, set up a dummy Gmail account, insightanalysis@gmail.com, and I wrote, "The case study dissected everything, step-by-step failure points, ignored market indicators, the over-reliance on aspirational language instead of real buyer data." I never mentioned Halverson by name, but anyone in the industry could connect the dots. I titled it, "When Branding Becomes Theater, a Post-Mortem on Form Over Function." I published it on Medium under the pseudonym A. Dale. By Monday, it was trending in the brand strategy section. By Wednesday, it was shared on 2 major industry LinkedIn groups. By Friday, someone from Brainerd liked the post. And then came the email. Not to me, but to someone inside Halverson and Flint. They forwarded it to a friend, who sent it to me. It was from Scott to Tristan. Subject line, urgent. "Tristan, we need to talk. Just read the Dale case study. The language is too precise to be coincidence. Are you certain this wasn't data David flagged last year? We're now fielding calls from 2 clients who recognize the framework. Clean this up, now." I read it 3 times, sipped my coffee slowly. That's the thing about erosion. It doesn't start with a landslide. It starts with water. Quiet, constant, relentless. I didn't need to take down Halverson and Flint. I just needed to remind the world that not every decision maker wears a blazer and a smirk. Some of us still wear scars, and we remember everything. 6 clients, 3 full-time contractors, 1 pipeline account that could change everything. That's where I stood, 2 months after walking out of Halverson and Flint with nothing but a pitch book and a promise. My consultancy wasn't flashy. We didn't have neon signage or a podcast, but we were fast, focused, and fiercely good at what we did, and people noticed. Clients weren't coming to me because they were angry at Halverson. They came because they were exhausted. Exhausted by bloated processes, disconnected jargon, and overpriced decks that said a lot but meant nothing. What I offered was simple. Clarity, delivered quietly. Lena had become more than a client by now. She was the first to believe in what I was building, and somewhere between late-night strategy sessions and quiet dinners, she became something else, someone I leaned on, trusted, looked forward to. She never tried to fix me, just stood beside me while I worked the pieces back into place. One night, after a meeting that turned into wine, she asked, "Do you regret staying silent that day?" I knew what she meant. My last day at Halverson, the boardroom, the handshake from Tristan, the thank you card. I hadn't said a word. I replay it sometimes, I said, but not with regret. I didn't speak because I wasn't ready to say what needed to be said. And when I smiled faintly. I let my work say it louder. That silence had been deliberate. The silence of someone who wasn't broken, just resetting his sights. Now, I was poised to win the rebrand bid for Tannigan & Cole, a century-old luxury retail group looking to modernize without losing their heritage. It was exactly the kind of project Halverson used to own. The kind of client Scott probably thought was still theirs by default. They weren't. My firm had made the shortlist after Lena casually name-dropped me to the selection committee. Once we got in the room, we didn't charm. We connected. We didn't disrupt. We listened. And when we presented, we didn't fill the room with adjectives. We walked them through data, history, nuance. By the end, the CEO of Tannigan shook my hand and said, "You made us feel understood." That's all anyone wants, really, not to be dazzled, to be understood. The official decision was set to be announced the following week, but before that, I attended the State of Brand Innovation Conference downtown, where Tristan was slated as the final keynote speaker. I didn't go out of spite. I went for clarity. The ballroom was packed. 300 agency folk, creative directors, CMOs, consultants. I sat near the back, unnoticed, just a notebook and an espresso. Tristan came out wearing a fitted blazer and that performative confidence I recognized so well. His talk was titled Velocity of Meaning, Building Brands in Real Time. It was a collage of platitudes, how today's consumer is liquid, how speed is empathy, how storytelling is a posture, not a plan. The cracks started in the Q&A. First question: can you speak to how your framework accounts for legacy audience perception, especially when fast-tracking a brand refresh? Tristan blinked, fumbled. Well, I think it's important to allow for elasticity in perception, right? Second question: you wrote about data harmonization as a secondary metric, but in the Dale case study, that approach was cited as a critical failure point. Thoughts? He flinched at the word Dale, recovered with a tight smile. That article was taken out of context. I didn't say a word, didn't move, just watched. Because sometimes silence is still the loudest voice in the room. 2 days later, the call came. Unknown number. I answered. "David, it's Scott." I could almost hear him pacing. "Tannigan & Cole," he said. "They picked your firm." I waited. That was our bid to lose, and we lost it. Still, I waited. Finally, he asked, "Why didn't you say anything that day?" "You just left." I kept my tone even. Sometimes progress looks like experience walking out the door and coming back through another. There was silence on the line, not the kind I once carried, but his. "I underestimated you," he said quietly. "No," I replied. "You just misunderstood me." I hung up, closed my laptop, and stepped outside. The city moved around me, fast and loud and bright, but I wasn't chasing it anymore. I'd caught up. And now, I was building the future on my own terms. 6 months ago, I walked out of Halverson and Flint with nothing but my name and a pitch book. Now I walk into rooms where people already know what I stand for. My firm isn't the biggest. It doesn't need to be. We're lean, focused, and we listen better than anyone else in the game. The model we built, empathy-first strategy with data-backed execution, has been profiled in 3 different industry publications this quarter alone. Not splashy profiles, thoughtful ones, the kind that actually get read. We work with clients who want more than trend chasing. They want clarity, purpose, something that lasts, and I give it to them, not by showing off, but by showing up. Every meeting, every call, no performance, just presence. I don't need to look over my shoulder anymore, but sometimes I do, out of habit. The other week I got a text from an old colleague I hadn't heard from since my exit. No greeting, just a screenshot. It was Tristan's updated LinkedIn profile. The headline read, "Consultant/thought leader in transition." I stared at it for a full minute, not quite smiling, not gloating, just absorbing it. Word is, he was pushed out quietly. No press release, no farewell post, just gone. A few clients walked after the Tannigan loss. Others started asking hard questions, and when they didn't like the answers, they stopped calling. The agency's board didn't even try to spin it. They just let him fade. I never sent a message, never reached out. There was nothing to say. Because this isn't about Tristan anymore. It never really was. Legacy is a strange word. It used to mean awards on the wall, your name on a door, the size of your office. But the longer I do this, the more I understand it's none of those things. Legacy is what sticks after the noise fades. The clients who still quote something you said 5 years ago. The interns who became leaders because you made time when no one else would. The people who feel seen, not sold, when you walk into a room. That's what I care about now. I think Lena knew it before I did. She once told me, "The best thing you ever gave me wasn't a campaign. It was a reason to believe the work still matters. We're still building things together." She's become a fixture in my world, personally and professionally, and with her, I never feel like I have to perform. I just show up, fully. Tonight I'm at a rooftop launch party for one of our newer clients, a sustainable clothing brand founded by 2 sisters who refused to compromise their values. We helped them refine their messaging, align their packaging, and build a brand story that actually means something. Now, they're celebrating their first national rollout, and the city skyline feels like a quiet applause. There's music, string lights, the clink of glasses, and the murmur of real joy. I stand by the railing, sipping a drink I didn't order, watching the co-founders beam as they thank their team. It's their night. It should be. A young woman approaches me, early 20s, sharp eyes, steady voice. "You're David Ellis, right?" I nod, guilty. "I just wanted to say, I'm a strategist, new, still figuring it out. But the way you ran our kickoff meetings, you made us feel like we weren't being talked down to, like our ideas mattered." Her voice doesn't wobble, but it has weight. I know that feeling of being seen by someone you respect. It stays with you. I raise my glass slightly. "Thank you. That means more than you probably know." She smiles and disappears back into the crowd. I stay there a little longer, letting the moment breathe. That's the thing no one tells you when you lose your job, your title, your place at the table. You think everything's over. But sometimes the truth is simpler. You didn't lose anything. You just stopped settling. I finish my drink, slip my hands into my pockets, and look out at the city, the same skyline I used to measure myself against. And I think, I didn't lose my job. I found my freedom.